Okay, so what we're going to be talking about with this video is how to factor trinomials of the form ax squared plus bx plus c when a, this first number, is greater than 1. So what we've been doing so far when we've factored, it's been pretty simple. We see that we've got the trinomial, 1 is always the first number. So then when I create my parentheses, and I always want to do those parentheses first, and even though they're sitting there empty, it does get my brain oriented towards thinking. I had to multiply something to get this x squared. What would it be? What's my only option? X times x. So when this number is a 1, the only option to put here is an x and an x. So it makes it rather easy, and then you look at the 45 and the 14. 45 first. What two numbers multiplied together give me a product of 45? And then those same two numbers added together give me 14. So my product is 45, 9 times 5. Add those together, 9 plus 5, I get 14. So those are the two numbers that go into the rest of the equation, or into the factoring. And same thing over here. It was n squared minus 3n minus 28. So n squared, no choice. N and an n is going to go there. And then the negative 28, product of negative 28, negative 7 times positive 4. If I've got a negative number here, I have to have a positive and a negative. That's how I'm going to get a negative. And then if this number is still negative, that means the number that is the highest, the greatest value, is going to be negative, because when I add the smaller number to it, the number stays negative. So negative 7 times positive 4 is negative 28. Negative 7 plus 4 is negative 3. These same concepts we're going to be using for the second part of this. So I just want to reiterate them and make sure they're making sense to you. Now if I look at this problem, we started out with 2a squared plus 2a minus 24. Now when we have 2, 2, and a 2, we see everything is all even numbers. So we know we have a common factor of it. At the least, it's 2. We always want to look for the greatest common factor. Well, since there's just a 2 here and a 2 here, it has to be 2. That's going to be our greatest. So I divide everything by 2, and what have I ended up with? A squared plus a minus 12. So everything got divided by 2, and that's how we got that. Now again, when I go to factor, I put in my parentheses a squared. How did I get it? I multiplied an a times an a. There's my a squared. Then what two numbers multiplied together will give me negative 12, but added together will give me a 1. The trick to this, whenever you see a high number here and just a 1 there, think of two numbers that are next to each other, consecutive numbers, 4 and 3. 4 times 3 is 12. And then, because it's negative, you know one of the numbers had to be negative. So, positive 4, negative 3. 4 minus 3 is 1. 4 times negative 3 is 12. And now, taking a look at this last one, again, there was a 4, a 24, and a 20. So we could have started out with dividing out a 2. Well, then we still would have been left with a 2, a 12, and a 10. Then we'd know another 2 could be pulled out. So if I could pull out 2 twice, that means I could pull out 4. So we divided each number by 4, and we ended up with p squared minus 6p plus 5. Again, I write my parentheses. What has to go here and here? A p. That's the only option. And then for 5, it's a prime number. So that is only going to be 5 times 1. Now the trick with this is positive, but that's negative, which means both of those numbers have to be negative, because a negative times a negative is a positive. But a negative plus a negative is going to stay negative. So that's how we get our negative 6. Negative 1 plus negative 5, negative 6. Negative 1 times negative 5, positive 5. Okay, so that's a review of what we've learned so far. Now, we're going to take it a step further. So, when a cannot be factored out by a greatest common factor, we can still possibly factor the trinomial The steps below will show the method called the slip and slide to factor the trinomials. So slip. The number we're going to slip is a, and we're going to slip it to the end of the trinomial and multiply by c. So what are we talking about? This is a. We're going to slip it over here times c. So that means I'm going to do a times c. And then I'm going to factor that new basic trinomial. So my number here is going to be x squared, because the a is going to be a 1 now, plus bx, whatever that is, and then plus a times c will go here. So then I factor that new basic trinomial, and then I divide both of those factors by the value that I slipped over in step 1. Now this is just the instruction. I'll be showing you how it works. Then I reduce any fractions that need to be reduced, and then slide any denominators up to next to the variable. And then when we say distribute to check, that means we multiply it back out and check and make sure it came back to equaling the same thing we started with. So let's get started on this. So the 2. There's not a 2 in it. There's no number that can be factored out of all 3 of these terms. So what I'm going to do is slip the 2 over to the 3. And then I multiply 2 times 3 equals 6. Now, my new term, my new equation is going to be x squared plus 5x. Notice the middle term stayed the same. And then this 6, the 2 times the 3, 6, plus 6. So that 6 went there. Now I factor that. Parentheses, parentheses. Okay, what is my only option now? X and x. It's the only thing I can have there. Everything is positive, so I'm going to put a plus and a plus now. So now I'm looking for number 6. I need a product of 6 and a sum of 5. So now I've got to think, what times what is going to be 6? 1 times 6, that gives me 6, but 1 plus 6 equals 7. That didn't work, and I know the numbers have to be positive. So when it doesn't work, I just cross it out. Using a whiteboard to do this can be really helpful, because then you can just push away the numbers. But it is good to keep track of what numbers you've been using. So always make the table. It goes much faster. You start seeing the numbers more clearly. Okay, so my other option is 2 times 3. 2 plus 3. So whatever I'm putting here, I'm multiplying. When I put it over here, I add those two numbers. And that is 5. 2 plus 3 is 5. That's what I'm looking for, a 5. So 2 goes here, 3 goes there. Okay, now I am not finished. That first part of it, when I did this, that was a slip. Now my slide is when I get that 2. So I slipped the 2. Now I'm going to slide that 2 right back. So it's this 2, and I'm going to slide it right back under here. Now, my next line down is going to be reducing these fractions if they can be. So we know that 2 over 2 equals 1. And I'm just going to make a note of that right over here. 2 over 2 equals 1. So that way when you're looking at your notes, you'll know where that came from. So I'm going to put x plus 1. And then we're going to do a little arrow so we know where that 1 came from. Okay, now here I am going to slip this 2 over here in front of this x. So when I'm finished, I don't have fractions. So that's always a good thing, right? Just think we got to get rid of the fractions. So now this is going to be that 2 goes right here in front of the x. 2x plus 3, and I'm done. And that's the factored form. and that is factoring with slip and slide. Now, I am finished. I factored this. That's what I was setting out to do. So there's my answer. But if I want to make sure it's right, I'm going to go back and add it together again. So this is my factored form, and I'm going to make a note of that so that you know when you're doing this, that's where you end. Factored form. And this is checking my work. So x times 2x, 2x squared, x times 3 plus 3x, 1 times 2x plus 2x, and then 1 times 3 plus 3. Combine my like terms, 2x squared. Bring those two together. And that gives me 5x plus 3. And that's what I started with. So it worked. Okay, so the rest of the examples are up on Google Class, so take a look at any of them that you're having trouble with. Remember, this is difficult. That means we have to practice. We can't just copy it and then let it go. We have to do it a couple times until you get the rhythm of it and it makes sense. I know you can do this. Good luck.